A very good afternoon, everyone. I'm Megha Shankaran. I had marketed the Karadi company. A warm welcome to each and every one of you on behalf of the entire Karadi Path Education Company. A big thank you for your time today, and I'm sure the next 2 hours will help all of us unearth some invaluable insights on the topic of early childhood education. Before I move on to introduce our co host and moderator, just a few house rules if I can request all of us to follow. For the entire duration of the session, I would request all of us to please switch off our audio and video. If you have any questions, you can click on the raise hand option and we'll be happy to take all your questions as part of our Q&A session, which is towards the end of the webinar. And lastly, I would request all of us to please change our display names to the name that you'd all like for us to print on the certificates that would be issued once you've all signed out of the webinar. And I will now move on, and it's my privilege to introduce our co-host and moderator of the session, Dr. Dhiren Mishra. Dr. Mishra has been teaching for over... Hi, Dhiren.
Hi, Megha.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Dr. Mishra has been teaching for over 2 decades now. He's taught at all education boards, that is CBSE, ICSE, CIE, and IB. He holds a doctorate in business management from Bhopal University, and he's trained by CIE to teach its courses. He's the founder of Life EDUCARE, and he was telling me just before this call how LIFE actually is an acronym for looking into the future of education. And true to its vision, Life EduCare, under the leadership of Dhiren, they've been successfully guiding school promoters in setting up and running schools that provide cutting-edge education, not just in India, but also internationally. A big warm welcome to Mr. Dhiren. Over to you, sir.
Thank you so much, Megha. A warm welcome to all of you. Good afternoon from Life EduCare. Welcome to this NEP 2020 and Early Childhood Education Think Tank. And I thank Karadi Path to have thought about doing this session. And let me tell you, had I not been the moderator, I really would have been a participant to this particular program. I'm myself, looking out answers for a couple of my questions on NEP. And who other than, our panelist who could answer all these questions for all of us today. So before I move forward and introduce all the panelists, let me give you brief statistics of this whole program. It was 6th of September that we decided we'll do this program. And we went live in terms of registration on 7th morning. And till date, we have close to 1,701 registrations. There are about 876 people in this room hearing this program. And we also have our Facebook Live, YouTube Live, both at Life EduCare and Karadi Path's program, Path's Facebook pages and YouTube links. And thanks to Megha, Pavitra and Arun and Bridge and Himanshu, who were working for the last 4-5 days, day in, day out, night, 10:30, 11 o'clock, to ensure that we can host this event. Now, it's my privilege to introduce all the panelists. And before I introduce them, let me tell you that every cloud has a silver lining, and so has COVID, that we have now accepted that we can meet online. Otherwise, to attend this level of seminars, all of us would have put together, traveled lakhs of miles from all over the country to one particular venue, and we would have, heard them. So it's really our pleasure, all the panelists, that you all are here today speaking at this think tank program. So I introduce Dr. Skandabali, who is the principal at the Hyderabad Public School, Begumpet, Hyderabad. Welcome, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Mishra. Thank you so much.
Dr. Bali has been involved in education since year 2000. He is currently working as the principal of the Hyderabad Public School. Dr. Bali has previously served as the principal of J.D. Goenka World School, Gurgaon, and he has also served at the prestigious Doon School, Dehradun, for 12 years, and 5 years at the Army Public School, Dakshai. Dr. Bali is a highly regarded school educator with an illustrious career in some of the premier institutes of the country. He was also the housemaster of the Tata House in the Doon School. Dr. Bali is also an accomplished writer, having authored several textbooks in his field of interest, that is geography. He has earned his bachelor's degree in geography and political science from Himachal Pradesh University, a master's in geography from the Punjab University, bachelor's degree in education from Kashmir University, and a postgraduate certificate in education from the Institute of Education, University College, London, UK. He is a firm believer in the infinite potential of the young minds he mentors and adheres to the principle that education is incomplete without incorporating core values within the system. I welcome you, sir. Thank you. Thank you for gracing this occasion. Now, I am privileged to introduce Madam Revati Srinivasan. Madam Revati is Director and Principal of the prestigious Singhania School, Mumbai. Welcome, ma'am.
Thank you.
Revati Srinivasan, ma'am, is a pioneering educationist with over 30 years of experience. She leads one of India's premier chain of schools, the Singhania Schools, with a focus on holistic learner-centric education. By training, Ms. Srinivasan has an advanced degree in education and management with leadership training at Harvard University. She is passionate about pedagogical innovation and early childhood education. Revati ma'am has driven innovations in pedagogy, interaction in the curriculum, creative assessments, quality reviews, best teaching and learning practices, inclusive classrooms, cognitive systems, and building linkages with schools in India and abroad for international exchange programs. Currently, she leads a team of more than 1,000 people, managing 4 schools and impacting over 10,000 students annually. Her other pursuits include conducting sessions on primary teaching, guiding teacher trainees from Denmark, the Netherlands, and Australia, and mentoring students in social responsibility through rural immersion projects, encouraging their active participation in Model United Nations sessions, and avidly promoting them to engage in physical activities. She was recognized by the British Council for leading the integration of international learning in her school, and has also been felicitated by HRH Prince Edward, Earl of Wessex, and the Consul General of Australia for her years of committed service to the cause of education. Welcome once again, ma'am.
Thank you.
And now I introduce and welcome Dr. Swati Popat-Vats, President of Early Childhood Association, APER Upper, and Podar Education Network. A warm welcome to you, ma'am.
Thank you, sir.
Dr. Vats is a global educator with more than 34 years of experience, and presently she is heading Early Childhood Association, ECA, which is a pioneer early childhood education organization of the country, and Upper, and she's also the president of the widely known Podar Education Network. Ma'am, our privilege to have you here.
Thank you.
Now I move on to, now let me tell you one thing, everyone. These names need no introduction. You just have to Google their name and you know everything about them. So we are really privileged to have all of them here today. Mr. Rohan Bhatt, I welcome you, sir. Mr. Bhatt is chairman of Children's Academy Group of Institution, Mumbai. And Mr. Bhatt is an ardent educationist and philanthropist, admired keenly in the role of a teacher, principal, and now an able administrator. With a long-standing contribution of over 38 years in the schooling system, Mr. Bhatt has played a key role in steering his schools to reach greater heights. He is the honorary secretary of the Malad Cosmopolitan Education Trust and Children's Academy Group of Schools, which conducts 3 branches at Malad, Kandivali, and Mumbai. The group has over 8,000 students studying in its 3 branches. He also functions as the treasurer for MISA, member of International Schools Association. It's a body which represents over 100 schools affiliated to Cambridge. Mr. Bhatt understands that teaching core skills and acquisition of subject knowledge is a challenging proposition for today's teaching professionals. He remains committed to supporting teachers to find appropriate solution in this context with recurrent upgradation of skills and expertise of his learned faculty. These innovative pedagogical and professional practices adopted in his school have secured it for it a rank in the top 10 ICSE schools of Maharashtra, according to the much acclaimed awards and magazines. Mr. Bhatt promotes quality education at the most affordable cost. It is therefore noteworthy that his schools have been recognized continually with the Value for Money Award, which is very important these days. Rohan sir, a warm welcome to you. Now, it's a privilege for me to introduce Dr. Srinivas Raghavan, Principal Bala Vidya Mandir, Chennai. Welcome, Raghavan sir.
Thank you for the invitation.
Sir has 27 years of experience in academic field, teaching physics and calculus, a subject which personally I used to be scared of. Worked in India, Middle East, and Canada as professor and school. As you know, currently he is principal of Bala Vidya Mandir, Chennai. One interesting thing about sir is that he was invited by government of Germany to develop skill development in German schools, explored education in Singapore and Finland to suit Indian scenarios. That's what sir has done. And he has introduced life-oriented education at Bala Vidya Mandir, Chennai. Sir, warm welcome once again. We are privileged to have you here.
Thank you.
Last but not the least, Mr. C.P. Vishwanath, co-founder and CEO of Karadi Education Company. And we all call him Vish. And I have a statement for him. I wish I was Vish. He is a multifaceted personality and is an educator, musician, and an entrepreneur. He's the co-founder and CEO of Karadi Tales, India's pioneering children's audiobook and picture books, and Karadi Education Company, an enterprise that is changing the way language is taught in the classrooms in over 3,500 schools, and the network is growing. And not only the private schools, but Karadi is there in government schools as well, a tool which I personally like. And sir is also the director of pedagogy at the rural schools run by Isha Foundation Coimbatore, which runs 9 schools and provides academic intervention in over 3,000 government schools. He is an accomplished Carnatic classical vocalist and mridangist, having given over 1,000 public performances. So now you all know why I say that I wish I was Vish. I personally welcome all the panelists. Thank you so much for being here today. And now we formally move on to the structured portion of the webinar. The first is early childhood education reimagined. Now with new education policy, the National Education Policy 2020, which came after, I think, 38 years, I've experienced the previous education policy as a school child, and now I'm experiencing that as an educator. Now, there's a background which I would want to give, and then I would request our panelists to speak on it. Now, from not recognizing, these are all my personal thoughts, from not recognizing preschools at all in 80s and 90s and being called as, now these are the statements given by some of the government officials, I was interacting with them, but in 90s, they were called as business arising out of lazy mothers, that mothers do not want to keep the kids at home. Oh yes, I've heard this. I've heard this from government educators. Why do you want to pull out a 3-year-old and bring him to a formal school? So they used to call it as a business arising out of lazy mothers, to formalizing it now and creating National Curricular and Pedagogical Framework for Early Childhood Care and Education, the NCPFECCR. The country has had a huge transition in terms of early years learning. Now, from being considered as a solution to both the parents working, a kid who has both the parents working, in 90s and early 2000, a preschool or early childhood education used to be considered as a home or a place where working parents used to send their kids. Now, to making it necessary, this is a huge shift in the government's thought process in terms of national education policy. So I request our panelists to tell us 2 hits and 2 misses in this particular policy. I would like to ask this to Dr. Skandabali first. Sir.
Well, thank you so much. Being first is an advantage also and disadvantage as well. The disadvantage is you are completely exposed, and the advantage is that you get an opportunity to speak a few points which others haven't spoken. So nonetheless, first of all, I want to say hello to all my fellow panelists. It's a delight to meet all of them again. And thank you so much for inviting me over today. First hit, which I think national education policy has had is, which has been missing in all the policies of the past, is that early childhood education has been included now, which was not looked at earlier as a formal sector, which was not looked at as an important sector, though that is the most important part of formative years of any human being's growth. So I think that is one big hit, according to me, which the national education policy has addressed. The second big hit, according to me, is giving importance or realizing the value of the local language of a child. I will obviously elaborate more in our discussions further. See, we are still somehow closed-minded when we talk about discussion around the use of Tamil, Telugu, Hindi, Punjabi, or any other national language of India to be used as medium of instruction in the early years as a mind block. Whereas if you see other countries, you see Japan, you see Russia, you see France, you see Germany, you see England, you see America, children learn in the language they are born with. We were doing that till British came to India, and after that they gave us this language, English, which is I'm not against the language of English. So I think this is the second most important aspect, or a big hit, according to me, that national education policy has looked at it, because the research also backs that the child learns better in the language he or she is born with. Their growth is much more faster in that particular language. Now, the first miss is also related to this. One of the miss is that they have given us this framework that you may, or you have to, or you can teach in the local language of the child, but the national education policy does not address the diversity of the country. Suppose I'm from Punjab and I get transferred to in the middle of my career. How do you expect my child to be taught in Tamil or in any other language? Second important aspect, which is related to this again, is national education policy does talk about professional development of the teacher, but does not talk about how the language is going to be dealt with in terms of training or growth and so on. Like, I can give example of my hometown, Hyderabad, right now, where I am. You have two dating communities. One is Telugu-speaking community, and the second is Urdu-speaking community, right? So how the national education policy, if implemented in the local language, is going to deal with these two languages in Hyderabad, there is no answer of that question in the national education policy. So these are the two broad hits or misses, according to me.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Over to Revati, ma'am. Ma'am.
Yes. To me, the first one that I liked about NEP was the flexibility of subjects, the choice that's given to students. Most often than not, and at least till now, there's been a very rigid system of choosing or choice of subjects. students didn't have much of a choice. And even if they had choice, like many of the curriculums do provide them a choice of subjects, the problem was students didn't opt for it. The reason being the mainstream at higher education level demanded a set of subjects for a particular choice of course. And in such a case, the parent as well as the child were apprehensive about choosing a wide range of subjects. For example, studying history with art and studying physics, for example. That's not possible now because though it is there's a choice given, students don't take it up. The reason being that, am I going to get admission in the higher education with this kind of choice of subjects? And you don't have maths, then you can't do this. That's what it comes across. But I think the second that I really liked about it, of course, Dr. Skanda did mention about it, but yes, the pedagogical structure that's come in now. I think including the pre-primary is very, very important. It's been given a structure. It's going to get sort of formalized. Otherwise, every second door had a pre-primary center. So I think that can be avoided. And there is something very, very professional about pre-primary or early childhood that I can talk about. So I think that's a very, very good system that we are. The problems that we are going to be facing is that while we give them the flexibility of subjects, how economical it is going to be from the school's point of view to offer such a wide range of subjects. From the point of view of employment of teachers for a particular subject, how are we going to manage that? So from the school management point of view, I think this is a very serious matter that we have to consider. So schools that may have perhaps 2 students for, say, wellness course will not want to offer that. Or 3 students for carpentry, why would I want to offer that? Because, it's going to be very hard on my finances. So that's one point. The second point that I'd like to say is about shortages of teacher. I think one thing that they've missed out is how are we going to bring in teachers or bring in students to opt for teaching as a profession? This has unfortunately become a last resort profession. And for whatever reasons, but students are the ones who are opting for a teaching professionally doing very well, one, or do not have prime interest in teaching. Someone who has to have enthusiasm from within, because if that is not there, the spark of interest one doesn't have, you can't create it for others. And therefore, for us to get into teacher training, it's important for us to lure good teachers into the profession.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Now I move on to Dr. Swati Popat. Ma'am, please tell us what are the 2 big hits and misses in this policy?
First of all, namaskar to everybody. I believe there are a whole lot of committed educators attending today's session. And my hello to all co-panelists. I know I have met many of you all at conferences and we are missing the face-to-face meetings. And but it's a pleasure to connect with all of you all here. So I'm going to keep it very brief, 2 hits and 2 misses. The 2 hits, number 1 is definitely that the policy now recognizes that 85% of the brain develops in the early years, which is something that brain research has been saying for the last 20 years. And Bonvita benefited by using it in one of its ad campaigns. But we as the education sector were reluctant in admitting that 85% of the brain does develop in the early years. And so it is, as Maria Montessori says, the most important period of a child's life. And because of that, they have now made early years an integral part of education, which means they have accepted that education starts at age 3. The second hit, according to me, is the foundational stage, creation of the foundational stage, which means the primary years, which is standard, etc., will not go through that stress which they now presently go through. So which means the curriculum, the format of approaching education, everything will be similar for these 5 years, and which is going to benefit children in the foundation of their education. 2 misses, according to me, are that there is no definition still of an early childhood teacher training program. We have a B.Ed, which is commonly accepted pan-India as a teacher qualification, but we don't have anything pan-India which is recognized as an early childhood qualification. I wish the policy had addressed that. And the second miss is the parent involvement and the parent education has completely been sidelined, mentioned in a few places, but I feel there should have been more emphasis on educating parents about education and their child's growth and development, because that plays an important role in school, for schools to ensure that parents are on the same page as they are.
Thank you so much, ma'am. And I know we have huge gathering, and there we are receiving some messages. We cannot accommodate more than 1,000 people in the room, and I think the room is full. So maybe if some other people from who you all know, if they're unable to attend, ask them to go live on Facebook and YouTube, and they can see this program. Thank you. Now I move on to Dr. Srinivas Raghavan. Sir, what as per you are two hits and misses in this policy, sir?
Namaste to the panelists and audiences. One important thing is that the system is formalized now. Okay, the early childhood education is introduced in a formal way. In that, it is very nice because learning happens in the early period. And considering the points that were brought by other panelists, I would like to add something more to it. The emotional development is included in this particular part, which is very important because education is all about how do you balance your emotions, as well as the ethics component, and co-curricular activities is removed and it is become core curricular activities. So from the formative stages, from the beginning, early childhood, if that core competencies doesn't distinguish academic proficiency and the co-curricular, the so-called co-curricular activities, if that distinction is not there, holistic development will happen in the child. And that's being focused very nicely in the program that has come in NEP, new NEP. That is one. And second thing is that if you see the health aspect of it, an insight into the health and wellness of the child is also brought in the formal way in the NEP. That is the second hit, which in my opinion is good. But if you see the missing part of it, the broadly giving the guidelines is fine, but how do you execute it? When it comes to executional aspect of it, training plays a very important role. It is not having the teacher. Having good teacher plays a very major role. To have a good teacher, what is the schema that is given, the rubric, and what is the period that has been given to train the teachers, existing teachers? We can create the new ones, that's different, but what is the schema for that? Have we given adequate time for all those things to happen in a synchronized manner to bring in best effective model? Okay, that's one missing out right at the moment. And the second thing is that when we talk about big goals and other things, it is always associated with the financial aspect of it. Okay, so are we allocating that finance to meet till the last point of our goal is reached? Okay, so our budget, is it suiting to the requirement? This is another part that has to be taken, that's missing. Okay, so.
Thank you so much, sir. And now I move on to Mr. Rohan Bhatt. Rohan, sir, as per you, what do you feel are two hits and misses?
Well, if there is an advantage and disadvantage in speaking first, there's also an advantage and a disadvantage in speaking last. Most of what advantage is that you are relaxed, that, okay, the first part is over. And the disadvantage is that you have nothing left to speak. And especially when you have such an esteemed guest with us. So let me first begin by good afternoon, wishing everybody a good afternoon, the esteemed panelists and attendees. And special thanks to Mr. Vishwanathan and you for having invited me here on this having this discussion on NEP. Now, as far as I am concerned, I feel that what we are doing in NEP, there is nothing left to discuss much. That is what we are planning to. That the first most important part is the recognition, as everybody has spoken, the recognition that has been given to the pre-primary section. which, as I always used to call, it's a orphan section. Nobody used to really bother about it. So that is the first recognition which has been occurred, and along with that, uh, the development of a national curriculum and a pedagogical framework, not only recognizing pre-primary, it's a part of the formal education, but also providing this, because only recognizing it would not have solved any problem. When you are also planning to have a national curriculum and a pedagogical framework for it, then the importance really works. Because when we are talking about 0 to 6 years, as Dr. Swati already spoke, and Dr. Srinivasan also spoke, that we are talking about the physical, mental, psychological, emotional development of a child. It lays the foundation for all the future learning. So this is a universally accepted fact now. And at the same time, we are also talking about, the NEP also talks about attaining universal foundational literacy and numeracy at all primary classes. Now, by 2025 is what they are expecting. Now, if you are going to expect that by 2025, it means that you have to effectively work with the pre-primary stage now. Because if the pre-primary stage is not worked at, attaining this universal this literacy, a foundational literacy and numeracy by 2025 is going to be an impossible task. So let us hope that this really works. The second most important part of NEP, which I liked, is again, as Dr. Srinivasan has already spoken, is about the school subjects that are given. That is the co-curricular flexibility and choice both. Talking about co-curricular activities or extracurricular activities, which were previously called, giving importance to that, offering mathematics as at different levels, because we have to understand this choice of subjects is a very, very important thing, because children are burdened with subjects and with topics which they have got no relationship, and they cannot see anything in future for them to use from getting any knowledge from these subjects. So this affects the child. It adds to the stress of the child, because then that is where the tuition culture comes in. Because even if the child is not interested in maths or science, and if he wants to go to take up arts or literature or something like that, he is forced to do that, and that is where some of the children are really poor at, and they really struggle, and they are declared failed, or because they can't do science and maths and they cannot carry on, and that is where the dropouts also start. So by eliminating them, or also giving them a choice of lower level of mathematics, a lower level of science, knowing fully well that, okay, these are the important something, scientific knowledge, mathematical knowledge is required to a child at the higher levels. Something which is required for his day-to-day life is fine. So this is two important things I think are the positives of the NEP. About the negatives, I have to say that I am very disheartened to know that there is no mention of the private sector in this NEP. 60% of the school-going children are today in the private sector, but there is no mention about it, almost zero mention. We are still talking about private philanthropic activity in this NEP. You have to realize that our population, more than 12 crores are school-going children. So now, with this kind of numbers, government is never able to go and give this kind of number of schools that are required, number of teachers that are required. It is impossible for the government to handle. This is where the private should have been recognized, especially private budget schools. Something could have been done to ensure that some kind of benefit is given, or some kind of incentive is given for this budget schools, so that, most of the budget schools in India are having fees less than 500, 600 rupees, which is a small marginal cost of what the government and the municipalities and the panchayats spend on their schools, and without attaining anything. the kind of quality that comes from these small private schools, small budget schools, is phenomenal, but no recognition has been given in it. And the second most thing which I feel is what they should have at least started off, is to bring accountability in the government schools. When these both private schools working and accountability coming up in the government schools would have complemented each other. And the accountability will not come till you give them the security, the government teachers, the security of the job and their pay. There should have been something which links their promotions, their salaries, their increments, something to the number of admissions that are coming to their school. So that responsibility would be there, that if there are no children in your school, you don't teach well, there are no children in your school, you are going to lose your job or you are going to lose your increments. So this would have gone a long way to improve the quality of government education. Private sectors, budget schools together would have addressed a lot of problem in this country. That's it from me for now. I hope I have added something new to the whole topic in spite of being last.
Yeah, thank you so much, sir. So now we move on to our last and the maybe, most underprivileged person now, Vishwanath sir, because you all said that the last person would you find it difficult to give a new view to the whole thing. But yes, over to you, Vishwanath sir.
Namaste to everybody. I think it's a privilege to be here, be speaking among all of these educators who have done so much and are so well known across India and beyond. And also to so many of the attendees. I think there are quite a few school heads and luminary educators in the audience as well. In terms of the hits, I would say that I am personally most happy about this idea of 5 as the first block of learning, because it really, taking up from what Dr. Swati said, is that it really, in a sense, it allows us to look at this as a unique block. Unfortunately, what happens is that when we move from kindergarten to class 1 onwards, the primary, there is a certain homogenization that unfortunately happens too early. And these children are all at this stage, anybody who's worked with very young children knows how far apart they are in terms of their milestones and how much more customization is actually required, whether it's a teacher in the class. So I like the idea of the fact that, and I'm hoping that this actually emerges into a genuine block of 5, where I am thinking differently, I am designing differently, and I am actually treating this phase of development with a certain set of goals that have to be achieved by the time that the child is past class 2 as it is today. So this covers that age group of 3 to 8 by virtue of creating this block of 5. I will give you the miss on this count as well, because it is related to this, is the fact that in the largest sector of students, where the early childhood is not yet formally delivered in a good way, which is through the Anganwadis, and then they go to the government school. The policy has kind of, I think, shirked its responsibility by not giving responsibility for this early childhood education to a single ministry. It has still, kind of given it to Women and Child Welfare and Ministry of Education. And anybody who has worked with the government knows that, that kind of collaboration just results in a lot of confusion. Where does money for one come from? Where does money for the other come from? Who's responsible for what? So by virtue of not having separated early childhood care as one element and early childhood education as another vital element, they could have actually made this work very well in the government school system as well, which currently does not have an pre-primary at all. So this is the relatedness. On the other hit that I really like is the fact that for the first time, we have the policy has recognized multilingualism not merely as a skill of languages, but from a developmental perspective. Because obviously, my field being language, you realize that knowing more than one syntax, how much more powerful the brain becomes. If you know a third syntax, how much more powerful your brain is. And this is not related only to your language ability, but to your ability across a lot of different subjects, both on the humanities side as well as on the STEM side. So it has these huge advantages. So I think there's a very, very specific statement and paragraph that recognizes multilingualism from a developmental perspective. And of course, very controversially, which it is likely to be, is that, you know, learning in the mother tongue has been put out there as a statement. There's not a single educator here who would disagree with the fact that I must learn in a language that is most comfortable. The question really is, as some of the other panelists have pointed out, have I created a process by which I can transition to that point? You know, each of our states is the size of many of the countries in the world. And so it is very, very possible for us. But we are also a single country and we are very migratory. And this is not only true of migration at the upper end, it is migration is across demographics. So how am I going to address these? And how do I stem the diminishing number of, let us say, in Tamil Nadu, you have Telugu medium schools, you have Kannada medium schools, you have Urdu medium schools, and these numbers have been diminishing tremendously. Every state has had actually more than one medium schooling. The government itself has been providing, but these numbers have, you know, completely vanished with the fact that, you know, everybody in Mumbai may either have to go to an English medium school or a Marathi medium school. And, you know, so in that sense, I think they once again, you know, left a lot of things unsaid in terms of how do I make this transition, because it is up to the center to actually show a little bit more clarity than what has actually been articulated there. And the NEP as a document itself could have been 3 or 4 times its size, because it is coming after 36 years. So they could have put a little bit more articulation into, you know, the ideas rather than, you know, let everybody interpret it the way that they wish to. So thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. And thank you all the panelists for your views on the policy. And as I told you that we have been getting a lot of questions from the participants. So I've summed up a few questions, added a few from my side, and I have a question for all of you. We actually overshot this session by 18 minutes. So now I will have to, you know, I'll have to be slightly disciplined in the next round, where I'm going to ask one question to each panelist, and you'll have to respond to the question in 1 minute's time. So my first question goes to Srinivas, sir, Dr. Srinivas. Sir, what is the new or different recommendation made in NEP which the progressive schools are already not doing, especially in terms of early childhood education, sir?
See, if you see the even the progressive schools, language part of it, by and large in early childhood, they focus on English. Medium of transaction and communication is by and large English. Okay, so that is what is happening in 95% of the private-owned early childhood education systems. That is one, and I think they need to work on the regional languages also. It can be given as an option, meaning they can give both. English being a communicative language which has to be trained, and regional language for the comfort of the child. So both has to be given is what I feel, and which is not by and large existing. Okay, so that part is missing.
Thank you so much, sir. So we have 2 of our panelists, Vishwanath sir and Dr. Raghavan, sitting in Chennai, Tamil Nadu, and talking about languages. Thank you so much. My second question goes to Dr. Skandapalli. Sir, what measures do you suggest for effective teacher training? Because early childhood portion of the policy says hugely about teachers training, and then you also need very fine training for our B.Ed colleges in terms of B.Ed also. And so as per you, what measures do you suggest for effective language teaching? Because see, the government is trying to talk about teaching in regional languages, and whatever little data I have 70% of our B.Ed qualified teachers write their examinations in vernacular language, especially, you know, in down south and in central India. You know, they follow Hindi medium or maybe the local medium. So what do you think that should be an effective teachers training framework?
See, there are two questions within this one question of yours. One is the teacher training aspect of it, and the second is effective teaching of languages. So, now, the first point is, as Dr. Swati Popat was mentioned, there is no formal mention of early childhood training across the country. Whatever is happening in bits and pieces in different private colleges opened up in different institute areas, again, not recognized per se, but they take those kind of trainings. Even coming on B.Ed, I think, unfortunately, I mean, I'm sticking my neck out when I say this, B.Ed training is also pretty outdated in our country, unfortunately. It's not progressive in nature. Unless until you are progressive in nature, the teacher training has to be imparted with activity-based learning, with the need of the day or the need of the hour. And the teachers need to be updated with everything what is happening in today's time. Things are not going to move. So that is very, very critical. I think that's something which is missing. And I hope that the government now and don't wait for the next national education policy. Similarly, when you talk about the learning of language is extremely critical. A student learns from the teacher per se, irrespective of which subject the teacher is teaching. So the student learns from the teacher the body language, the pronunciation, the vocabulary, what you speak, how you speak, your habits, etc., etc. If a teacher himself or herself is not deep enough in that particular language, is not familiarized with the right pronunciation, is not familiarized with the right usage of the words, is not familiarized with the right diction, then the same is going to be reflected on the student as well. Because we are talking about early years, right? Early years are extremely critical. That's one of the reasons why you would see certain people pronouncing technology as technology, right? Psychology as psychology. The reason is because they have learned that in the initial formative years, the same thing from their teacher who was teaching them, right? So it's very, very important that one, we focus on the right kind of training for the teachers, number one. Number two, there has to be right kind of institutes which train teachers for teaching the languages, which is exceptionally important and extremely critical. I hope that sometime very soon we have Indian Educational Services or Indian Education Institute, maybe with the likes of you and Mr. or maybe Dr. Swati Popat was taken into that advisory board or something like that, you know, a brain tank by the government, wherein they use the stakeholders to take decisions. I think if that answers your question, then this is my viewpoint.
Thank you so much, sir. And my next question is to Swati ma'am. Ma'am, we have a lot of participants from preschools, and some of them have raised this concern, and who better than you to answer this? What will be the impact of 5+3+3+4 on the standalone preschools? Because a lot of them feel, would they suffer a threat, or will they blossom and can include class 1 and 2 also? Some of them have clearly asked, will standalone preschools be asked to close down, and we'll be like, asked to either open a full school or close down? What do you think would be the right thing for the government to do?
So at the onset, I would like to tell everybody that this is a policy, which means it's a kind of a framework. It's a guideline. Education being a concurrent subject, state governments will now have to look on expanding each point as per their states. So we have to stop worrying so much about the policy, especially the private players. For the first time, you should be feeling very happy. If you compare it to the national ECCE policy, which came out in 2013, it had no mention of private schools. This policy at least mentions private schools in whatever context. I don't think private preschools can ever shut down, or the government would shut them down, Because what is their alternative? The government itself is struggling with its Anganwadi programs because they basically started as nutrition and health programs, and then education was added later on. So I don't think the government would be so foolish as to close down the private preschools. Yes, the government would definitely want to close down those who are not doing quality work. So that is something that the schools should be more worried about, that are they doing quality work? Are they doing developmentally appropriate curriculums? That should be the worry, that should be the fear, and not this worry that gabbar aayega aur hamare schools close kar dega. Aisa kuch nahi hone wala hai. Number two, many of the private players feel that they will now be allowed to start up to standard 2 because it's a foundational stage. No, that will not happen. That will happen only in the schools, the K-12 schools, where there is already grade 1 and grade 2, which is where it will be clubbed. Private preschools will have to show a continuity, that where will my students get admission for standard 1 and 2, because that is the main stress that parents go through, that after you, where, what, how do I go about? So I don't think private preschools need to worry about being closed down just because the policy has now created a foundational years.
Thank you so much, ma'am. And my next question goes to Rohan Bhatt, sir. Rohan Bhatt, sir, this policy actually, formally schoolifies. There's a formal schoolification of early years. Do you think it's a positive step or it's a negative impact?
I think the positives will be more than the negatives. There is going to be, as Swati Popat ma'am was just speaking, there are a lot of issues connected with this. But as I first spoke about with reference to my first question answer, the national curriculum and pedagogical framework is coming up. So this is a very big positive which is there, because what we see now today about the pre-primary, which we call as independent pre-primary schools classes, which are running, most of them have mushroomed all over, and it is actually basically run from some homes, from some small classes, some couple of rooms or something like that. And most of the owners and the teachers employed, both are untrained. So that is the major problem with the current scenario in this. Mm-hmm. So when we see this scenario, what is happening is the emphasis of these schools and teachers is on rote memory and on writing skills, because they want their children, when they go home, to the parent to see something, to hear something. So they want them to learn ABCD. So the parent is happy that my child knows ABCD. The parent wants teacher wants the child to learn as many nursery rhymes as possible. However they speak it, without any emphasis on the intonation, on the pronunciation and so on. They want the child to write ABCD. So this is what is the front end of it, which is visible to the parent. Whereas if you see the pedagogical importance, when we look at it, where the research shows that we have to look into the cognitive development of the child at that time and not into other things. We are looking at the psychomotor development of the child. We are looking at especially listening and speaking skills rather than the writing skills. So these things are the major difference which is there between these private schools and the schools which we call as well-established good schools which are there. So which lays the proper foundation for the child. So I feel that when at least these schools which are there, when they have a proper curriculum and they have the proper framework, pedagogical framework, I feel that there will definitely be improvement. And the emphasis also on teachers, some kind of teachers training, which is of course not discussed in detail. I feel that there will be some improvement, definitely, in all these small private schools which are there across. So that is the positive. And the negative is that because the schooling has become formal, the pre-primary has become formal, the RTE comes in. Now, when the RTE comes in, there are a lot of norms that come in with RTE. You just can't open a school with RTE. So many of the schools which are now present will have to fulfill those norms. Now, how much it will be fulfilled and how much will not be fulfilled, there will be government permissions to be taken. So I feel that a few of them will definitely be affected. Few of them will definitely close down. And that will lead to a major unemployment, because this is a major source of employment to many women. So this would be the negative point which I look at. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. In fact, we have more than 700 messages here in the chat box, and all our YouTube and Facebook pages are flooded with comments. Thank you so much. And a lot of questions too. We've tried incorporating, questions together and ask the panelists. And in the end, we will take some of those questions. Now, my next question is for Revati ma'am. Ma'am, recently the government has made the B.Ed course as 2 years. Instead of 1 year, now it is 2 years. And other side, the government feels early years, these early childhood years, which is more complex and complicated in terms of understanding, what their needs and teaching them. The government says a 6 months diploma will suffice. What would be your view on it, ma'am?
Okay, first of all, I think the fact that one equates the children are younger, so you can have a shorter duration of course, is not acceptable, at least to me. Okay, certainly not. I think the younger the children, the more intensive should be the training. This is my clear view. And let's understand that we are building and creating the foundation and for the future learning. So if that is not strong, nothing is going to be strong. Having said that, very often there is a view, and at least till now, there has been a view that, okay, my children have grown up, I have nothing to do, so I can start a play school. That idea has to move out. They have to start thinking that this is a profession that they have to be in. There is commitment to the profession. There is content in the profession, and the fact that there is regular training, because education as a field itself is so dynamic that it changes constantly. A policy we made yesterday is not going to be relevant completely for 5 years. Maybe the broad outline is there, but the processes will constantly change depending upon the needs of the children, the area that we are in, and so on and so forth. And therefore, I think a very comprehensive education training for teachers is very important. I don't think 3 months courses, 6 months courses from XYZ Institute will have any relevance at all. Other than saying that I have qualified teachers in my school, it doesn't add a purpose. That education is not equal to qualification. Let's understand that. So no amount of qualifications and bits of sheets of papers coming in the form of certificates is helpful, because I'm saying this more in particular, keeping in mind the times that we have gone through. As soon as the lockdown was declared, I know of thousands of teachers who have done every possible course because they were getting certificates without payment from Harvard, from University of California, from every, Stanford, the university you named it, you had. All that you have to do, if you want to certificate, you pay another $350, you get a certificate, and that you take a printout of. So they have done, teachers who are doing pre-primary have done courses in Python, they've done courses in coding, they've done all kinds of courses, which may or may not be of relevance to them. So my point is that if we must have a focus, we must know what we are doing. And therefore, a teacher who is a kindergarten teacher or a pre-primary teacher, a teacher who's in the foundational stage, the preparatory stage, must work towards specialization. Early childhood education has many, many aspects to it, not just the socio-economic, development, or the emotional development, or the physical development, gross motor skill development, the fine motor skill development. It's not just only about that. There's so much that you have to do in specialization. In fact, can you do special education for children of that age? Can you think in terms of childcare, basics of childcare? childcare, early childhood administration. Are we thinking about that? Because I think it's very important for us to have the right quality persons in early childhood. They must be a complete all-rounder. It has to be a holistic development, and therefore I strongly urge that program should be 1 year or even more. But okay, 1 year, they must have 6 months at least hands-on training, which is internship, so that they are guided by a guide who tells them where they're going wrong. We need huge oodles and oodles of patience to be with the young ones. You need tons and tons of energy to be there. You cannot be a passive teacher. You cannot be an unenthusiastic teacher waiting to deliver all the lessons that has come in the framework as curriculum or tool. They need to have something that they develop on their own, for which they have to be creative by themselves. And all of that cannot come through training, I understand, but it's very important for us to give them that atmosphere. Let's understand the teacher who is trained is not just coaching her children or building her children or making her children engaged actively. She's not just doing that. She's actually creating the environment for their learning. And if a person has to create an environment, it has to be 360 degrees, a complete holistic one training. So I believe a 1 year program will help.
Okay, thank you so much, ma'am. Now I move on to Vishwanath sir. Sir, you said that one ministry isn't handling early childhood, and we've always used the combined term ECCE, early childhood care and education. Now, care and education are overlapping things. So, Vishwanath sir, if you are being given the opportunity to restructure the whole ECC policy, what would you do?
Okay, that's a big responsibility now that you have put on me. But let me take a shot at it. I think let's look at it this way. I mean, if I have health professionals and education professionals, do I not look at them as two extremely deep specialties to begin with? If I, view it from the fact that I'm not going to go to a teacher to tell me how well I am and give me medicines, and I'm not going to go to a doctor to tell me, how to do my maths chapter, why would I suddenly in this particular place especially where things are, the child is a far more, vulnerable personality, in that sense that if I do a few things wrong, I leave the residue of it for the lifetime, whether it is a question of health or whether it's a question of education. So why would I treat these two in some form or the other in this ambiguous way where I say, the two of you work it out together and figure out what you're going to do as far as early childhood care and education is concerned. So women and child welfare will do something. The two have to be actually very, very dedicated. And which is one of the reasons why I stated that because this structure exists both at the center as well as at the state. If the center had shown the way very clearly, saying that let's look at nutrition, health as an important element, because with women and child welfare, the whole thing is prenatal and then postnatal for the woman as well as the growth of the child from a nutritional standpoint. Let's look at that as a dedicated activity. Let's look at the education of that child as a dedicated activity, because the more that you spend time with the first standard, second standard and third standard children in a government school, you recognize how much harm we have done to those children by not having given them those 2 earlier years of education or 3 earlier years of education in a dedicated manner. Anybody who has been to an Anjanwadi knows what happens there in the form of education. I mean, as has been said earlier, it was just a kind of an add-on that happened at one point in time and said, "Inko kuch sikhate bhi hain." Let's also teach them something. Anyway, they are here. Let's, in addition to kind of being a daycare, let's also do a little bit of education. But that kind of a casual approach to it on the government side, I think is going to do a lot of damage. I hope, as we all know that this is a policy, and I hope that the articulation of this eventually goes all the way to the administrative setup also, which says that, okay, I have my government school here. Let the child come into the government school and let that government school operate very specifically from pre-kindergarten, lower kindergarten, and upper kindergarten. And just like I use my school as a medium by which I give the midday meal, I also provide the nutrition, and this is only a center for nutrition, but the professionals are completely different as to who teaches, who manages that teaching process, who creates the framework for that teaching process. That has to be the education ministry. And what does the child eat? What is the nutrition? What are the health parameters that we are monitoring? That is an entirely different responsibility. So I would actually reimagine this as the fact that this can work in the same geographical space, but it can't work with the same administrative or caregiver framework. Those two have to be completely separate. You're on mute, Dhiren.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, all the panelists, for your crisp and concise response, because we could save 7 minutes now. 6 minutes rather. We are late by 12 minutes. We'll try to make that up. Now we go on to the next section of this think tank program, where, the reason why I wanted to be a participant also for this particular program. There's a problem statement which we have drafted. I would read that, and then, my question as well. I'll take the privilege to be a questionnaire as well. Over the last several years, there has been a substantial migration of school students towards English medium. Even government schools across the country are opening dedicated English medium schools or English medium sections within their schools. Andhra Pradesh is heavily investing in converting all their government schools to English medium. Recognizing that the medium of instruction should be in a language the child understands, the NEP is recommending mother tongue, local language, home language as the medium for learning until class 5 at least. Now, before we go further, I have my question. I come from Bihar, so I know Bhojpuri, but I was born in Central India, so I know Hindi. So I do not know what my mother tongue is, because Hindi and Bhojpuri are same. I am married to a Malayali, so her mother tongue is Malayalam. And I have a 6-year-old daughter, and both of us, me and my wife, we speak to my daughter in English. So she understands English very well. And possibly next year, I plan to settle down in Bangalore, which is predominantly a Kannada-speaking town. I want to ask the panel, what language would be the local language for my daughter? And maybe I request all the panelists to give their viewpoint on the language thing. And we'll start this with Swati ma'am.
Okay, so I have the same problem. I'm a Gujarati married to a Haryanvi. Half of this country doesn't even know that there is a language called Haryanvi. So, because they always think Punjabi is the same, spoken by everyone. But I would urge everybody to read the NEP. It says very clearly in 4.11, I think is the clause, that wherever possible, the use of mother tongue, stroke, home language, stroke, and they put a lot of strokes. So which means whatever is comfortable for each child is what needs to be put into action. I will tell you how we've been doing it in our schools. Because presently also, if you see when a 2-year-old or a 3-year-old joins your school, the child does not understand English. The child is very comfortable with the mother tongue. So what we've done is in our admission form, we ask the parents to give the common words that this child uses for everyday things like water, food, going to the washroom, I want mommy, etc., etc. And then the teacher puts it up in a chart format. So say, for example, Yash in her class speaks in Marathi and Samiksha speaks in Malayali. So Yash's common words are put in English, but in the Malayali words and Gujarati. So when she's referring to that child, she just looks at the chart and she's able to speak that. So over a period of time, the teacher learns to speak a few words that calms the child, that reassures the child in the child's mother tongue. We also try to ensure that whichever state we are in, We try to include multiple languages in our singing, in the stories that we expose children to. Google has a fantastic app called Google Bolo. So it is very, very important that we have to now focus on the solution and not the problem. As Dr. Skand Bali said, that we have to be very happy that languages are now being recognized in our country. Look at us. Why is nobody talking that in Finland and in Germany and in UK schools, the Sanskrit is being taught? How many of us teach it in our schools? So it is very important to understand that language should not become a barrier. Language should not become our weakness. Language needs to become our strength. And we all together to ensure that the vision of the way we are counting for loose days. We are becoming a predominantly English community, and all our languages are going for a loss. So it's time I heard a teacher tell me that Punjabi is such a down market language, people don't want to listen to it. And she's from Punjab. She said people want to listen to English. So we've started associating words like down market and stuff with our regional languages that we should be proud of. So if you read it, I urge everybody, read the NEP. It clearly states that you may have your mother tongue may not be your home language, which is the case for you, Dhirendra, for your child, and which is the case for many of my nieces and nephews. So let's make it our strength.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Now I move on to Dr. Srinivasan. So what is your take on the language part of the policy?
If you see that personal experience from my children, okay, so they know Hindi, Telugu, Tamil, English, and one more foreign language. So the advantage of knowing more languages is one is you communicate with the local region. Second thing is when you go into the market for profession and other things, English is mandatory. Today, nobody can deny that. Even this communication, we are all preferring to be in English. So English is mandatory. Okay, you cannot avoid. We can give all a couple of languages more. Nobody can deny that. And we can also include the regional language. Some difficulty will be there in the earlier part of the children until they settle down in the schools. Maybe for 6 months, 8 months, there will be problem for teacher, there will be problem for the child. That's it. But sign languages are there, and children understand the language very well, what the teachers speak, and the body language also plays an important role. Initially, for a month or two, this language will be a barrier for kindergarten. After that, it is not going to be a barrier. In my opinion, more the language you know, what happens, your thought process becomes better. Okay, so language has got to do with the thoughts. Okay, it is not about knowing the language. Okay, it is about the thought. More diversified languages. I don't say whether it is Indian language or foreign language. More diverse, the neural network becomes very strong, and your thought process is very high. If you see the past history of our own country also, many people who thinks at a higher level than you and me knows many more languages. Okay, maybe they will write in one language, but they know more languages. So language is not just about communication between you and me. It is a communication of thought. Okay, so more languages means your thought is getting diversified. So in my opinion, we should not narrow down only to the regional language. And now Indian scenario is also like a lot of migration is happening from north to south, east to west. All these things are happening. There should be some sort of commonality. Even if the child or the parent moves from one region to another region, fundamentally they should not suffer for some time. Okay, so we should give priority and strike a balance, and the schools can take independent decisions, and there should not be any restriction that I will teach only in Tamil or Hindi or this or that. So take the statistics and take into account of the situation for that batch, for that year, and then develop it. Okay.
Thank you so much.
That's my view.
We have one of the respondents writing in the chat group saying that you are multicultural, but I am a Kannadiga married still don't want to study Kannada. Maybe what Swati is saying, that we are trying to downplay our own mother tongues. I know, when we were growing up, and I shouldn't mention, but when Laluji was ruling Bihar, we were ashamed of calling ourselves Bihari, which I'm not now. So my next question, my next panelist would be Vishwanath sir, who masters the art of teaching English to non-native speakers. Sir, what is your take on this policy?
So, small correction there. English is the product that we have, but the Karadi path approach basically is suitable for any language because it is derived from the way that how is it that in India we have become so effortlessly multilingual? How many of us have become multilingual? And as I've said, the language problem or the language conundrum basically does not remain a conundrum the moment you think about multilingualism as an easy possibility. You think about multilingualism as some huge mountain to climb, then obviously you're going to say, how is this conflict going to be resolved? Because we have lots and lots of writers who write in two languages, so at a very, very high level. So the ability to acquire proficiency in 2, 3, or 4 languages is not as difficult as we have made it out to be. And the problem really arises from the fact that our formal pedagogy has come from monolingual societies. So why are we learning from people who have never mastered more than one language and treating them like the experts in language learning? Why isn't India the language teacher to the world? So that is my, that will always be the statement that we'll make, because we know how everyone in this panel and everyone, even in the audience who are educators, have had the experience of children moving from one part of the country, coming into their school, not knowing the language, the local language that is there, and mastering that local language within 3 months. So it's not as if it's now from a pedagogical perspective, you now need to be aligned with the natural way of language learning. So the moment you are able to do that, this dilemma goes away, is the fact that, as Dr. Srinivasan said, why am I not teaching Tamil with the same level of enthusiasm as I'm teaching English in an English medium school?
Very true.
And why is it that the teaching of Tamil to a child who may be from Bihar is not a good thing? It is still a good thing. So the thing is that this child can become proficient in Bihari. This child will be proficient in Tamil. This child will be proficient in English. And it's a question of now I have a choice in terms of how do I want to learn moving forward. The moment you give me choice, you empower me as a learner. I don't have any complaints about the whole thing. At a systemic level, though, we must recognize the fact that our whole infrastructure, unfortunately, functions largely in English when it comes to engineering, when it comes to the NEP exam, when it comes to any of the other higher education institutions. So until we kind of start replicating that at the level where I'm saying that if I want to learn engineering in Tamil, there's an excellent institute to go to. At that point in time, then it becomes relatively, an easier proposition to say, because keep in mind that when it comes to academic literacy, as different from functional literacy, because very often we do not recognize the fact that learning in a language is much, much more than being able to understand and speak the language. Being able to kind of articulate Newton's first law in Tamil would not be possible for a normal Tamil speaking, somebody who's proficient in Tamil, because that demands a different level of skill when it comes to language. But all of these things are actually eminently possible if we look at multilingualism, as many of the panelists have said, not just a question for the purpose of learning language, but simply for the purpose of developing my neural network in such a manner that I am now good at multiple things, whether it is the artistic side or whether it is the mathematical side, all of these things are. And for Dhiren, for you, I would give you some pretty, hard advice. Each of you should speak in your respective languages to your child, and let the school speak its language to the child. Yeah. Give the child the benefit of learning 3 languages, because it's a blessing that you have. So not a problem. So I hope I will, if and when you invite me to your house, that I will hear 3 languages being spoken there.
Definitely, sir. I'll try doing that. And thank you. I'm honored that I'm a part of this whole discussion as a moderator. But yeah, my question is answered. So next, I would ask Revati ma'am to enlighten us on this.
I think we are living in a world of multilingualism. And no matter what, the more the languages we acquire, whatever stage at which it is, for example, speaking, some of them we can speak and read, read and write. So the fluency may be different for different languages, but as many languages children should learn. We are preparing our children for a world that's not known to us as yet. They're all entrepreneurs in the making. They're all design thinkers. We do not know whom they're going to be collaborating with in the near future. And if we confine themselves to a particular language, it's not going to work. But I'd agree with Dr. Swati because the NEP does not force a particular language. It gives you the choice. It just tells you do what's comfortable. That's it. But it tells you that give importance to the local language, give importance to the mother tongue, and let children learn to feel the pride of speaking that tongue. And I am very strong believer of that. We must speak our mother tongue the way it is spoken. It cannot be anglicized. We must know the literature, the poetry in our mother tongue. We must know the poets there. Same way with the local languages. We must read the literature. We should be able to appreciate literature. That's aesthetics. That's what we have to teach our children with all the chaos and commotion that can be outside. If I have to find peace within myself, I must have a taste for aesthetics. And the aesthetics can come from fine arts, music, dance, name it. For example, we all as children as South Indian families learn Carnatic music. I didn't know Telugu, but I was taught Carnatic music. But when my teacher realized, my guru realized that I was just singing the way he was singing, he started to explain the meaning to me. And it became more meaningful. And therefore, there were more expressions in my voice when it came out. In a similar manner, in our own schools, when we teach them songs, when we teach them rhymes, teach from all languages. Teachers can just go log into Google to get the right pronunciation of words. And if you tell the music teachers to do it, they do it fabulously. So when you have a culture which celebrates multilingualism, I think that's what children will learn to do, that, okay, there are diversities in all of us, and then we celebrate that difference. It's your language. Nothing can be forced on anyone anymore. I think it's all about acquiring. I have a 4-language formula in school, which includes Sanskrit as one of the language, Marathi as a second language, and Hindi as well, and of course English. And all the children speak very fluently. In fact, the plays that are put up in Sanskrit looks as if, to me, and when it is presented, it appears as if it's their native language. They speak that so fluently, without as if it's mugged up. So I think it's very important for us to teach them to respect things around them, teach them to take pride in their own language, the literature and the offerings of that particular language. Then you are a true citizen. And because you are going to be going out, you're going to be interacting with a whole lot of people, it's so important for us to have them learn English as well. So then they become global citizens in the truest sense of the word, with an Indian flavor, completely rooted in Indian ethos, having pride for the country, yet being able to recognize and celebrate the differences that may be outside the country. That's what we have to do, because then you won't see the kind of violence that we see in the name of things in our country, because you will learn that it's all right to be different. It's all right to have different religions, and it's all right to speak different languages. There are just going to be no quarrels, fights, and chaos over languages and caste and community. And if that is what we are aiming at, I think education is all about giving them the importance of languages.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Now I move on
sorry for the interjection, but I want to make one. Thank you very much, Swati ji and Revati ji. I think we have been working on the Sanskrit Karadi Path program. Now, with your encouragement, I think we will accelerate it and we will try and get it out there in 6 months.
Great. So now we would like to know Mr. Rohan Bhatt's view on the language part of NEP. Rohan, sir?
Yes, I am here. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. We can.
Yeah. You want me to speak on that particular?
No, on the language part of it.
Now, as far as this is on the language part is concerned, I have to first let me qualify what I am going to say before I start speaking on that. The first thing that I say is that I agree that teaching should be, the child should learn the first the formative years, the primary years, education should be in its mother tongue. I have no disagreement with that. But the question here, which I am more concerned, is that will policy ever be implemented in our country? It is there, as far as I remember, since 1968, I think, when the Karadi Commission came out with the framework. Since then, we are speaking about using mother tongue in primary education. But after so many years, we are still where we are. We have lost, I think we are a country roughly with around 800 languages, if I am not wrong, and with 2000 dialects of it. So in such a diverse country, it is very difficult. I agree. It is not easy to, and with this migration issues and all these things coming up, teaching a child in the mother tongue is going to be a very, very difficult task. So that is why I feel that it is not going to be an easy task to implement this ever in our country. And add to it the problem that every state is so emotional about its own language. Every state wants that, they're so sensitive that they want each child in their state, wherever you may be coming from, that child should study their language right from 1st standard to 10th standard. Now, when you bring the 3 language formula, let us see what are the options left. You are, like if I take an English medium school, I have to teach English. Then whichever state I am to teach that language. Then I require one language from our country, which I think due to the, whatever you say, due to the television, radio, whatever, but one language which everybody now understands is Hindi. So I take it as the universal. I don't call it as the national language, but I'll call it the universal language now developed in our country, where people understand Hindi at least everywhere. So I am also teaching Hindi across. So now where is the option for a school left? You have put me in a straitjacket and telling me that it is a 3-language formula. Now, what is the 3-language formula? You have already defined what is 3 languages I have to learn. So where do I put the mother tongue? So if I have, the schools are given some option at least that, okay, that the state language should maybe taught a little later. I would respect the state language, because the people who want to stay in that state should know or be able to converse with the local people. So I am okay with that, but that can be picked up even little later, but mother tongue cannot be. So there would be some options available. So this is the problem which I am seeing with this implementation of 3-language teaching children in the local or their mother tongue. This is what I'm saying is just an impossibility in our country. I do not know. I may 4-language formula, but how many languages are you? I am planning very seriously that 4th language, Sanskrit, has to be implemented. I think my team will get in touch with Revati ma'am to see which periods, which subjects can be taken away, so that we can push in a 4th language at least one national, which I feel very proud. I would be feeling very proud, because I feel very sad at the story when I see the French and the English children having Sanskrit periods, and I not having an option at all to start the Sanskrit period. So this is, having said all this, I do not see that impact of it going to impact. If suppose one day it does happen, and we are able to teach children in our local and our native language, I do not feel that it should affect the English and the you can see, I have seen lakhs and lakhs of people and millions of people, children, people all over the country have studied in vernacular medium. They are quite proficient in their jobs as on today. So I don't see why it should be affected. Maybe their pronunciation would be wrong, or what I call it different, if not exactly wrong. How I pronounce is immaterial. The whole idea of a language is to, I feel, is to communicate with others. As long as I am able to communicate, do my job well, mission accomplished as far as I am concerned. So this is my take, that the states should become less emotional about it and let people learn their language in some way or the other, and schools can then think of supporting it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. A refreshing view. We have Dr. Skandupalli to answer this section. This is the third section.
Well,
and now
a lot has been spoken already. I'll take a few minutes of yours to explain this whole scenario. I'm personally a very strong supporter of all the languages. And when it comes on learning, I strongly believe, despite having taught 20 plus years in English medium schools and heading English medium schools, I strongly believe that the local language or the mother tongue of the child should be the medium of instructions to make him or her understand. It is the critical part is the teacher. The teacher should be able to incorporate and deliver the content in the language the student wants to learn. For example, if I as a student go to Madurai, my teacher should be teaching the class in Tamil, but if I'm a non-Tamil student in the classroom, the teacher should be able to comprehend the concepts to me in English as well. I'm not talking about the teacher to teach me in Hindi or Punjabi or Telugu, right? Similarly, if a Tamil student or a Telugu student goes to, let's say, Bihar, the teacher should be able to comprehend the same in the language of English. Now, there are two concepts here. One is the language, learning of language, and the other is the concepts of other subjects. Why on earth are we teaching physics in English to our students? Why not in their mother tongue? Physics has nothing to do with English. It can be taught as beautifully in the mother tongue as well. As Mr. Vishwanath said in the beginning, the concept learning is best for a child in the language he or she is comfortable with. So I feel, number one, we have to focus on that part of it, which is the teacher training. And I completely agree. Formative years and early years should be in the language the child is comfortable with, be it a mother tongue, be it the local language, be it the English. The beauty is that if the minority community, when I say minority community, I'm not talking about religion. When I say minority community of transferable people, we are forgetting that still 80% of the country does not transfer. They do not move. There are people in Punjab who do not understand Hindi. So I don't agree with this blanket statement that majority of the people in the country understand Hindi. No, they do not. There are a lot of people in Maharashtra who may not understand Hindi. Comprehension of a language is completely different than understanding that language. I'm also able to comprehend Telugu when somebody talks to me in Telugu, because you can try to, break those emotions with which they are talking about. The second thing which we are forgetting is, in future, the language which you speak will be redundant. When I say redundant, you will have gadgets, you will have a Bluetooth, which if I put in my ear and Mr. Vishwanath puts in his ear, if I'm talking in Hindi, he will be able to listen the same thing in Tamil if they are connected. And if he's speaking in Tamil, I'll be able to understand the same thing in Hindi. The technology is going to play a major role in terms of communication of the people. I am typing in Hindi an email to you, and you will be able to read that email in Russian because your computer has that particular setting, right? The third important aspect is any language is the soul of a culture. You cannot take it away. If I am a student, imagine a 5-year-old or a 6-year-old child wants to understand the concept in mathematics or physics. If he has grandparents at home who can speak only Tamil or Telugu or Marathi or Kannada, and if he has understood that concept in the school in the same language, his grandparents will be able to explain him or her. But a child cannot go to the adults for help, even at home. A lot of our children in our country, forget about these so-called elite English medium private schools, which are a minority in the country. Think of those lakhs and crores of children who are studying in their villages and communities, who come from the families where their parents have not even gone to school, right? So these are all the concepts which we have to look at it. I am a strong believer that national education policy, when it talks about encouraging the local language, encouraging the medium of instruction, I'm sure there are a lot of people who have done research, who have read research and have come up with this document. Most of the people in the country are interpreting it wrongly. They are not saying that you have to impose Telugu in all the schools in Telangana. They are saying what Mr. Vishwanath said in the beginning: teach in the language a child is comfortable with. You should not teach only in English in the class. That's the whole point. So again, the trick is the teacher training, the adaptability of the teacher. Then I expect every teacher of the country to know at least 2 languages in India by default, and one has to be English, right? If that is the scenario, and if they are well trained, I don't think there is any problem in us dealing with the situation where a child from Punjab cannot learn or study in a school in Kerala, or a student from Andhra cannot study in Haryana. So I think these are some of the concepts we have to look at. It's a very beautiful policy. It has been crafted beautifully. We Indians have that notion from beginning to say, ye kaise hoga, or how is this going to happen? You have that mental block in our country. We have to be progressive in nature. We have to nourish and cherish this diversity which we have. We should not become a Germany. We should not become a Japan. We are India. And the beauty of India is different languages, different cultures. Let them flourish. That's what I feel about it.
Thank you so much, sir. In fact, that's what I understand these days. A lot of parents are not able to teach their kids, not because they do not know the content, because they do not know the language, English language. I mean, and I know my grandfather used to teach me tables, tables. He never taught me tables, he taught me pahadas. He said, sawa ka pahada seekho, ded ka pahada seekho, 1.25 and 1.5. And I think, that's how I could master arithmetic, if not mathematics. So you're right, sir. Languages, if content is taught in vernacular language, a lot of parents and grandparents will also be able to help their children. So I would read a statement from one of the participants. Mr. Rohit Venkatesh says, the level of intellect on the topic of languages has been handled by the panel with such dignity and elan that I'm truly privileged that I was a privy to this exchange. Thank you so much, all the panelists. And this also makes me tell you that we are now delayed by 37 minutes. And now we have to go on to the third stage of structured discussion, which is the 6 big questions, where we had made this format where each panelist can ask one question to another panelist. So here I would now go a little flexible, because you all have given so much of input that a lot of questions are already answered. So I now make this as an option. If any panelists want to ask a specific question to another panelist, you all can answer. Otherwise, we move on to the last section, which is an open house. Is that acceptable to all the panelists?
I am in favor of the open house.
Let's move on to the open house.
There are a lot of eminent educators in the audience. Let's respect that and give some time.
We have a lot of educators here. So we
And
received
also,
about,
if I may add half a sentence here, and
sure,
also
please.
we as panelists will get to see each other a lot. I don't want us to start bashing each one that why did you ask that question and this question. So it's better to take questions from the ones whom we don't know.
Thank you so much, sir. So the 6 big question now is over, and then we move on to the open house. We received, as I told you, 147 questions, and we have included questions specifically about the NEP. We have, avoided questions like, how will COVID impact schools, online teaching, classroom teaching tips, information about Karadi tales and life EDUCARE. We would love to do that, but we are missing that as well. Questions for higher classes and related to salaries and infrastructure norms in the new NEP. We are avoiding these kind of questions. We are trying to focus on questions related to NEP. And still, I had close to 80 odd questions. I've tried summing up questions, and a few registrants were chosen to ask their questions. I would see if they are there in the house, and then I would request them to unmute themselves, switch on their video, and ask the question. We have Dr. Sunita Fadnis from Turning Leaf in Bangalore. She had a few questions. Ma'am, if you're there, you can unmute yourself and ask the question. Dr. Sunita Fadnis? I guess ma'am is not there. So I move on to the second participant, Ashok Kumar sir. He is the principal of Ganga International Academy, Bhopal. Sir had one question. Sir, are you there? Please unmute yourself and ask the question.
Yes, I am there. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening, sir.
Yeah, actually, just want to put forward one question. If I'm wrong somewhere, I'm extremely sorry. My question to the esteemed panelist here is that we were talking about the change and about the languages and lot many things. Why not about the curriculum? We have been following the same curriculum past many years, and there was not such like important changes in the curriculum. Looking to the need of the time and the 21st century challenges, there were as such no changes made in the curriculum. Just want to inquire regarding that and why we restrict to the classroom learning more than that, like we need to have pragmatic type of learning. We have just stick to the didactic learning. So will this change also be coming in the NEP, or will some changes are going to take place in this?
Sir, is your question directed to a particular panelist?
No, in all I'm talking about.
In all? So I leave up to the panelists to respond. Anybody?
Okay, I'll take the question.
Thank you, ma'am.
Number one, there is a very good paragraph in the NEP, especially when it comes to early years, which talks about how the curriculum and the learning needs to be multifaceted. It's a very beautiful paragraph. I want you all to go through it because it actually gives you the vision of how learning in early years is supposed to be. Also very important to understand is curriculum is going to be done, and it's going to be the responsibility of the HRD, which means now the Ministry of Education. Of course, those 4 ministries are going to be part of the planning and the implementation, but it is also mentioned in the NEP that the core curriculum will be designed by the MOE, which is the NCERT. And if you see the NCERT preschool curriculum of 2019, it is an excellently drafted curriculum. It actually reduces the stress and pressure from the child. And all these discussions that we have on writing and homework and all, these are devils that each of us brought into our schools. It was never told by any policy. We got governed by parents, and we brought this into our schools. It's high time we started following the policy and educating the parents about the policy, so that the right methods are now used for our children.
Thank you, ma'am. Now, the next person is Miss Anupa Kaushik, who's the principal of Kelly's MM School, Gokak, Karnataka. Ma'am, if you're there, please unmute yourself and ask a question.
Yeah, good evening, everyone. Yes, we would love to teach in the regional language or the mother tongue at the primary level, but I was just wondering how easy or how difficult it would be to bring the children onto English at a later stage. That was the question.
Ma'am, do you want to ask this question to a specific panelist? Yes, you are. Hello.
Hello.
Yes, you are audible, ma'am. So if you want to ask this question to a specific panelist? Hello. Since you've heard her question,
I think the man was Mr. Skandabali should be answering this question.
Yeah, I'll take this. I think it's not difficult to learn English at any stage. There are two things in this. One is spoken and the other one is written. Both of them can be taken at any stage. Children can learn languages very easily. It is our mental block that makes us feel that if our children don't speak the language, they're not going to be able to speak it later. I don't think that is there because experiences in our own schools as well as society. I think there's a lot of noise in the background. Okay, so I think that children can learn languages. It is only a medium for communication. So therefore, I think very easily that when teachers talk bilingual also, it works very well. So it's not very difficult because in a language, in your own mother tongue, conceptual understanding is very, very strong. So once they've understood the concepts well, then I think picking up the language is not great guns. And as long as we don't grade what they are doing, I think they pick up this very fast. The minute you start telling there is an exam, there is a test, there is something, it's going to be a kind of an evaluation, that's when we add stress. Two, on the matter of languages, let me tell you, there are parents who talk only in English to their children. They only talk in English at home and they don't speak in their own mother tongue. So it's there again that we are faulting because then children do not understand their mother tongue at all. So do make it a point to speak in the languages that the child is very comfortable in. And I think very naturally, all of us do that. When we are talking and we realize someone is not understanding, we immediately switch over to a language that is going to be understood by the other person. What we do amongst adults is what we have to do with children as well. Very consciously, we have to do that. So I think you don't have to force English. They listen to it, they'll pick up their words, no matter which language it is. Language is something that children pick up very well. They can speak up to 4 to 5 to 8 languages at a stretch.
Thank you so much, ma'am.
Can I come in here, Mr. Dhiren?
Sir, please.
There's one more point I would like to add in this is that why people prefer English as a medium of instruction right from the lower classes is another reason is that because there are the fear if the child learns in its in the mother tongue or in the regional language in the first few years, the problem starts in the higher education. Now, because there are no proper universities catering to the degree college in regional languages. So the fear is that once I am out of the school system, I am forced to speak or learn in or study in English in future. So if you see Karadi Commission in the 1968, when it spoke about primary education, it also spoke about developing sufficient number of universities in the local language or regional language or the state languages. But what has happened is no one has taken any interest in developing enough universities in that regional language. Now, when you don't have a option at all in future, so that every parent feels it is, or every child will definitely feel it is better to be prepared for what I have to study in future. If I have a future where I can speak, when I have enough colleges, enough universities which are continuing the education in regional language, in Kannada, Tamil, Haryanvi or whatever, then the acceptability may be more. So this is one of the fears that is going to be there. That's one point which I missed out and wanted to add here.
Thank you, sir.
And
now,
I would like
next,
to add one point
sir,
here.
please, sir.
See, as Mr. Rohan has pointed very clearly, that we have teachers who don't find technical terms in their respective regional language when it comes to certain concepts. That also is the biggest problem for teachers as well as for the students. Okay, so when we shift to the languages, we need to prepare ourselves to give the technical terms, because technicalities are developing faster, new terms are coming, whereas our regional language doesn't have such kind of terms. And these are all certain complications which will be faced in the longer period of time.
Thank you, sir. Now, next is Mr. Jacob P. Ajit Matthews, who is the principal of the Choice School in Cochin. Ajit, sir, are you there? Ajit, sir, are you there? I think sir is not there. And the next question is from Madam Kajal Chatija. She is trustee and director to EduDrone We Connect Pune. And but then that question is already answered by Swati ma'am. So Kajal ma'am, if you're there, you can ask whether pre-primary schools will disappear soon. But Swati ma'am has already answered that. Now we have Mr. Levi Paulos, who is school manager / correspondent from Asian Christian High School in Hosur, Krishnagiri, Tamil Nadu. Sir,
yeah, good evening. Yeah,
good
I'm
evening,
Levi.
sir.
So, we spoke about how difficult this will be from an implementation standpoint. This policy is changing after 34 years, and thousands of existing institutions need to change, a major cultural paradigm operational shift. So what are some key suggestions that you would provide to ensure implementation of these changes? Could a separate entity, like a private entity or a separate body within the government machinery, can take on the project management aspect of it and navigate through the various challenges that institutions might have? Of course, this is not part of the policy framework itself, but I'm thinking the government has something in their process to make sure the implementation happens. But what are some key suggestions that comes to your mind as an educator?
Do you want to direct your question to a specific panelist? I will leave this question to the panelist choice. Anybody who wants to answer this?
Certainly, to take the directives in a systematic way, there are two options.
Sir, can you be a bit louder? We can't hear you clearly.
Yeah, now can you hear?
Yes, sir. Very nice.
Yeah. There are two ways. One is to achieve the implementation level to a greater height. One is we need to depend on the government to set up independent bodies to monitor and suggest and take it forward. This is one area where we don't have control by and large. Second thing is, as local bodies, we can collectively work together. And as a community development, as educationalists, we can take it forward and develop at least within a certain region. It is possible, and I think we must do it, is what is my opinion. So within the local region of schools, say maybe 20, 30 schools can join together and pull in the brain and thought process, and it'll be more effective than depending on the governmental agencies, is my opinion.
Thank you, sir. We have Ms. Geeta Krishna, who's an ELT expert from Chennai. She has a question. Ma'am, can you please unmute yourself and ask a question? No, I think she's not there. Ms. Madhumati Banerjee, you had a question. I think I saw her in the meeting. Ms. Banerjee? Next is Mr. Ayan Gupta, who is principal for Podar International School, Surat. Mr. Gupta, if you're there, please unmute yourself and ask your question.
There. Can you hear me, sir?
Yes, I can.
Yeah. Good evening to all the distinguished panelists and educators. It is heartening to note that in the NEP 2020 document, there is a mention of the strong investment in ECC, which has the potential to give all young children such access, enabling them to participate and flourish in the educational system throughout the country. My question is to Swati ma'am, that when it comes to the system development for the skill training aspect, how do we drive forward the massive challenge of the skill development program for the teachers to make really the objective of the NEP a success?
Thank you so much. And how are you, sir? Pleasure to connect with you virtually.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Part of the same family, we still don't get a chance to meet each other or see each other. So pleasure. That's a wonderful question, Mr. Gupta, because building the teacher capacity is going to be the best way to implement the aspects of the national education policy. As you are aware, Podar runs a one-year diploma. It's a teacher training diploma, and we also run a course which is in line with UK. We will have to ensure that teachers are trained on aspects that they need in the classroom. I know a lot of teacher training programs which are very strong in theory, but have very limited internship experience to the students. In the early years, the more I am in a classroom as a student, I will learn more than an amount of theory that you give me. So it is very important that I earnestly request all those who run teacher training programs, who are getting their teachers trained. It's not just the theory aspect that you need to focus on. You must give practical experience. A teacher must know how to do a longitudinal study for her to be able to understand what is observation, because it's only that which is going to help her become a good early childhood teacher.
Yeah.
And if I may just add here, Mr. Dhirendra, about the language, because which is what everybody is worried about. 3 things are going to happen where this language is concerned. Have you all ever wondered that we all have children coming from different language backgrounds? How do they play with each other? Have any one of you ever wondered? They all play with each other without knowing English, without knowing each other's language, because they accept that language is not the barrier here. It is us as collaborators. Number 2, I'm sure parents will have to sign a form in which they'll have to tick which is your language of preference. And I'm sure 90% of the parents are going to tick for English. So half your problems are solved there. And number 3, we have so many technology companies who do so much for schools and what they are going to come out with a solution for every teacher, how she will be able to communicate to each child in the language of the child's preference. So don't worry about these things.
Thank you so much, ma'am. So now, if there is anybody who wants to ask a question, yeah, somebody wants something?
Yeah, thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. So anybody who wants to ask question, maybe we'll allow 2 more questions. We are 4 minutes past time, but we'll allow 2 more questions. Anybody who wants to unmute and ask? Open house in true sense.
Good evening to the panelists. I have a little question. So we have spoken about extensively about language, use of language in learning and making the concepts clear to the children. So in this process, between the pre-primary years to 1 and 2, what will be the process of assessment? How are we going to plan the assessments in such a way that it shows the progress in development and growth?
Ma'am, is your question directed towards a particular panelist?
No, anyone can answer. That's fine.
I'll take that question. Firstly, I'm not a big supporter of assessments in the country when it comes on formative or summative assessments. However, when it comes on assessing a child as young as you are mentioning, maybe in pre-primary years, I think what can happen is that you could create activities in a way where the participation of the child or the contribution made by the child will actually depict what the child has learned and what is their assessment level. So I don't know if I have been able to answer your question, but I think we need to focus more on activities in which they are engaged, involved, and then observe them. And on the basis of observation, we assess rather than making it a completely different assessment pattern.
Yes, sir. I completely agree with you, sir. Thank you for answering the question. And we need to have certain rubrics to kind of guide teachers who are not so very trained.
Can I add one point?
Yes, sir. Please, sir. Please, sir. That will be great.
See, there are two things. One is assessment that will be helpful for the teacher and the taught to.
Srinivas, sir, please put your mic near yourself.
Hello. Yeah.
Yeah, better.
There are two things. One, every school should prepare. One is assessment, another is evaluation. In the assessment, we work on the progress of the child and we supplement later whatever is required. But evaluation is basically judgmental. So, are we talking about judging a child's capacity, or we want to provide some pathway for the child to grow up? So, these are the two things which
Yes,
the school should develop. Okay.
Sir, I am looking at process of growth and development. That's all. Not to judge a child or anything of that kind. So, we need to have some standard parameters which will give us milestones for their growth.
That every school should must create milestones and see. And
Excuse me, I'm Geeta Krishnan. I have a question. I want to know your opinion about mixed age group in kindergarten. I think Mrs. Revati Srinivasan would help me with the question.
Before we come to your question, I want to answer to Ms. Banerjee's thing. Ms. Banerjee, if I am not wrong, many of these international schools are working on rubrics. And they are creating their rubrics as per their topics, as per their lessons, as per each and everything. And if we assess the children through rubrics, that will be the best way to assess, and that will not be a grade wise or something of that sort. So this is my opinion. Rest is your take.
Yes, Mrs. Revati Srinivasan, may I have an answer to my question?
Excuse me.
Yes.
I'm Mrs. Sharma, Mrs. Urmila Sharma from SPNS Pune, and I have.
Yeah, I could hear one more question coming across. Okay, let me tell you, Mrs. Geeta, that it's very important that children, a year here and there doesn't make much of a difference, at least in the early part of it. We are, according to the NEP, going to have children coming in with a little bit of differences in the age. As long as physically they are able to get along very well, I do not think there's a problem with having multi-age levels in a class. However, one has to understand what has been previously done also with that child. So if that happens, because otherwise if the child is already learned somewhere and come back and repeating the class with you, then it's going to be different. I'll share one example that I had in my school. A child walked into a kindergarten class and he said, "Ab rona dhona ho gaya hai, to पढ़ाई करें." That means if you've all finished crying, can we start studying? And then he asked, "What's the homework for today?" And he walked out of the school on the first day of his school saying that, "What sort of a school? There's no homework at all." So you can understand what it is. And then we realized that the child had already, when we called for the parents said he had already completed his 1 year of schooling elsewhere. Okay, now in such a case, I think it's difficult. But otherwise, age to a gap of 1.5 years difference won't make a change according to me in a classroom. Children play with each other anyway. And I don't think by the way of, and you're not going to be with any concept. It also depends upon how the teacher is going to be handling. So I'm sure that it will come out very well. And one has to keep in mind the whole class. So the lesson plan, when the teacher is making her instructional design, should be very, very clear that she's addressing every child in her class. And everybody is actively engaged in hands-on experiential activities. That's more important.
May I come in here if Dr. Mishra allows me to?
Sure, sir. This is the last interaction, and then we formally close.
I would like to differ I don't know how to say it. I'm a little embarrassed as well, but I would like to differ with Ms. Srinivasan here. I think the age difference in the early years matters the most.
Hello?
Even if there is an age gap of 6 months between two children of PP1 or PP2, that is a huge gap, which is not so much visible when you are in the college. So a teacher of the early years or the younger primary years have to keep in mind that there are children with different age groups, and they have to assess them accordingly. The handwriting pattern of a child who is 3-year-old and a child who is 3.5 years old can be hugely different. So I think this awareness of age-related issues in the early years are most important. Again, I'm coming back to the same, it's a wheel, it's a circle. I'm coming back to the same thing. Teacher training, and teacher training is the key to address all these issues. And as Dr. Watts also said, unless until you come up with a clear rubric or a clear training program for the early year teachers, things are not going to change for better. We have to invest in the teacher training. So I personally feel that the age difference in the early years can make a lot of difference in the learning pattern of a child, and that has to be kept in mind when the teacher is teaching. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. So I will now have to formally close this program, and I thank each of the panelists. But before that, I will have to allow somebody desperately wants to speak for half a minute, and that person is Amit Singh, principal of Sapphire International School, Ranchi, who has been messaging me that I need 30 seconds. He wants to say something to Vishwanath sir. Over to you, Amit, but wind up in 30 seconds.
Okay, good evening to all. And this is for Vishwanath sir, our dear Prime Minister, if he can hear to this. He said that government doesn't want to be into education. It should be, it's for the people, by the people. So Vishwanath sir, I resonate with Bali sir, what he said. Assessment should be for the teachers. Come on, it should not be for the students. Teachers need to be assessed, and you have such a beautiful program of storytelling, of expressing oneself. It's all about action. It's all about communication. Language is all about action and communicating to the students. So why not people like you who can come forward and train the community so that the teachers are well equipped when they get into the classroom. I hope this message of mine reaches the ear of the policymakers and they allow people like you to take this up at national level. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Amit. And in fact, I was, while, moderating the session, I could not hear a lot of interactions, between you all and the answers what the panelists gave. I will listen to the recording once again, maybe tomorrow, and make a minutes of the whole event, and maybe we can pass it on to various agencies. Thank you so much, each one of you, all the participants, all the panelists, the tech support team of Karadi and Life EDUCARE. Thank you so much. I formally close this program. Namaskar.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Namaskar. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you once again, Vishwanath sir and Mr. Dhirendra.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you, panelists.